You have been living a war all through this life and all through every life that you have ever experienced on the planet Earth as a human being. Always there has been struggle. Always it is the struggle between life and death, truth and illusion, love and fear. It has been the human duality. As you entered in to the human journey, you became subject to the illusion of duality, to the shadow that has no substance of its own, but is rather the negative reflection of the light. Through your fear, you persuaded yourselves to believe in the darkness, to believe in fear, and to give it power through the power of your belief. Always the struggle between the poles, yearning for peace within, and experiencing war. You as a human race are now ending a long chapter of your journey, ending the war, ending the duality. You who have consciously sought a personal spiritual path to enlightenment, to grace, to the acceptance of love, and to the banishment of fear, have been over the last few years fighting your Armageddon within. All of the tentacles of fear that have twisted you and your life during this incarnation and all the incarnations that preceded it, you finally took challenge with those tentacles of fear. You finally turned and stood. You looked through the illusion. You saw that emperor of fear had no clothes. You saw that you had power over what had been your fears. That by experiencing them fully, in the faith that was the way to release them, you looked into the heart of darkness. In each life, in each incarnation, a little different heart, a little different form of the darkness. All of you sharing the outlines of the journey, all of you dealing with the same dragon, but each in your personal way, your personal demons, the issues in your life that have blocked you, errors that you have repeated and repeated. You took back your life. You finally took responsibility for your life, for your decisions, for your actions. You let go of the need to blame so that someone else, something else, could be made responsible instead of you. You had little faith in yourself, in your goodness, in your worthiness, in your strength, in your power. You had been journeying for so long in the darkness that all you could see was the dark. When the time comes in any life that you can no longer be seduced by the inconsequential, when you can no longer blind yourself to your issues and to your destiny by distracting yourself with work, with play, with love, with lust, with anger, with sport, with whatever has come to hand to dazzle you and turn your attention from within. Finally, as the light breaks, you can no longer turn from it, and you choose to walk to it. That light is the light of your own wholeness, your own self-acceptance, your own belief, your own faith. And it is armed with that belief and that faith that you journey through the shadow, through the darkness, the valley of the shadow that is fear, experiencing voluntarily, though you didn't know what you had volunteered for, or doubtless you wouldn't have volunteered. That is the necessity of this spiritual journey, that first you must come into it full of illusion, that it will be easy, that it will be glorious, that you will find very quickly peace, that you will rise above your fears. And then you quickly find and find and find and find again that every step that you take on this spiritual journey brings you closer and closer to death, to the domination of fear, closer and closer to the heart of your own inner darkness, until finally the night is so black that you can see no further light. And you say, what have I done? And where have I gone? And where am I now? And who am I now? And how the hell do you get out of here? You are solving the mystery of life without knowing what it is you are solving. The key, the reason that your spiritual labors, that your powerful faith, though it may shrink to the size of a mustard seed, is nonetheless enough, that the struggles of that journey into the dark, those struggles are brought to an end by your acceptance of grace, of the energy of Christ. This is the end of an age and the beginning of a new age. This is the end of the Piscean story, the completion of the specifically Christian aspect of the many lives that you have led over the last 2,000 years. The story of the age of Pisces is the story of sacrifice and martyrdom, of victimization, and finally, of transformation. Death and transformation. Death and rebirth. And it is now that you are beginning the journey of self-discovery to answer the question, who am I now, that I am reborn, that I am transformed. The energy of Christ, as it has entered you by your invitation, has helped to transform you. The energy of Christ is the energy of love, unshadowed love. There is no duality in God. That is a creation, and your spiritual growth comes from your journey into duality, to being convinced by fear, and finally to release fear by embracing it, not turning and fleeing, but embracing it in all of its forms. The forms that have said to you, you are not worthy, you are not good enough, you are not strong, all must be clasped to your spiritual bosom to recognize the reality behind the patina of fear, the reality of love. And so you love yourself finally, not in spite of those factors that had caused you dismay in the past, but because of them, because they are a part of the glory that is you. The glory that is you, because you are indistinguishable from God. One with God. Finally discarding the mask that has blinded you from the knowledge of your own true nature. The transformation ends the duality. What do you do when you are no longer ruled by fear? And mind you, as I've said before, this is new for you. And the ghosts of old fears still linger. But they cannot claim you any longer because you have withdrawn your belief in them. Over these past few months, you have been going through a process of dealing with the questions at the end of the chapter. Did you understand what you have learned? Let us remind you. Boo! The fear of abandonment. Boo! The fear of betrayal. Boo! The unforgiveness of myself. The feeling of unworthiness. But they do not stay with you now. They are not you. They are but fading memories. Your war is over. And what does it mean when your war is over? It means peace, and it means peace in so many different ways. Peace within. Peace that comes from believing in yourself. Peace that comes from understanding, not in an intellectual way, but from the heart, that you are on a spiritual journey, and that journey leads only to triumph. That it is an adventure with a guaranteed happy ending, so that you can begin to take on the challenges of being a human being, balanced and whole, in a world still torn with fear and with strife, that you can live and love the adventure, having no fear for yourself, compassion, to be sure, more than you were ever capable of feeling before, because it was so much more important to feel sorry for yourself than to feel compassion for others. Now there is no need to feel sorry for yourself. And the reception of the Christ energy as it integrates into your being and becomes a part of, recreates you into the whole human body, mind, spirit, one. That the power of that transformation, bringing you peace as freedom from fear, bringing you wholeness, pure self-acceptance, pure forgiveness. Jesus the Christ came into this earth as an exemplar of love beyond human belief. And in the form of personal self-sacrifice, and then the triumph over that sacrifice, showed you in his life, even more than in his words, the reality lying behind the illusion, and how you have fought that message ever since, how you have misinterpreted it, how you have warped it. But now, the gift offered 2,000 years ago is being finally accepted by you and you and you and you and many yous around the earth. Some who may use different language and different words to describe this process of transformation, but who are nonetheless experiencing it. Your myth, that is to say, the guiding story, the plot behind all of your lives in the Western world as the students of Christ, is different in its form, but not in its content. Scrape away all of the nonsense egomaniacally attached to religion by its primary proponents, and you find a unified message in one language emphasizing this area, in another this area, in a third this area, but all with a commonality, and when you draw them together, a beautiful harmony, a full vision of understanding. This is the end of the Piscean age. You see around you in the world, in these last few years, a resurgence of old enmities and old arguments and old rivalries and old hatreds and old jealousies, all of the detritus of the darkness of the soul that has lain and stagnated and ignited and stagnated again, now coming once more and finally to the fore. All of those who say, my way is the only way, all others must die, are now coming into the final confrontation, where the outcome will be that the universal truth, embedded within all of the lies and all of the self-serving means and ways of the religion that masks the story of the Spirit, finally come together. But first, in rage and in anger and in age-old resentment. And so the gods, quote unquote, reach the final battlefield. And if, you can look at the world, you think, well, politics is the big thing. Various political opinions and so forth. But you scrape that away. And you see that throughout this age, it's all been one thing. It's been religion. The vision of God as edited by human beings. That comes, that is the bottom line. Whether it was Hitler and his worship of the ancient gods, communism, their denial of the orthodox gods from which the Russians sprang, is in itself a form of worship, a distorted vision of God in man. But now you see the politics crumbling away, and see what has lain beneath them are these quarrels of the gods and their adherents. And so the focus comes to that birthplace and holy place of such a vast preponderance of world religions, the heartland of the Middle East, the focus of Jerusalem. What you are witnessing now in the news and the actions taking place in the world is but a beginning, but a foretaste, a preview of coming horrors. When fears collide, they expand, and one fear feeds upon the other. And my fears feed on your fears, and yours on mine. And fear and rage, being a form of fear, overwhelms the human being. The human being buries himself, buries herself in the anguish of fear and darkness, feeling that the only light can come by defeating all of those who oppose him or her. That has been the story of war throughout the ages. But here we have something new. Here we have the first and the final war of the transition. The war that ends the age. The war that brings the peace. And the armies of the night gather to turn the night to day with rockets and bombs and slaughter. But that is not all that is operating. There are flowers growing in the battlefield. A transformation is taking place, and you have seen it and felt it in your own lives and in your own substance. And what is true for you as a human being is true for humanity as a whole. And that struggle through the darkness and into the light that has been your experience, you, the pioneers, those who have sniffed the first sense of the new age, the new reality, leading the way, strengthening yourself so that you may survive and thrive in the struggle that is death and birth in one. Creating a new reality, every single individual in the world who is going through the process of spiritual transformation, who is a willing volunteer for that greatest of all tasks, ending personal duality. Everyone that does that connects with everyone else that does that. Connects how? Connects spiritually. The reality of the spirit is far more complex and complete than the appearance of separation that is a part of the illusion of human life. You see yourselves, have seen yourselves throughout history more by your differences and by your separations than by your commonalities and by your oneness. God is one. Humanity, therefore, is one. Broken into 1,000,000 shards, but now to be rejoined. Not in a sort of ant-like anonymity, but in the enormous amplification of the glory of individuality that comes when you recognize that in your perfect difference, in your perfect individuality, you are joined to all others, all of you creating, finally, a whole greater than the sum of its parts by your interconnections. And so as this age dawns and comes into its fullness, you will have the joy of playing in your own oneness, absent fear. And what a different world that is. Without fear to goad you, without the past to cling to you, without the future to frighten you, to live in that eternal moving moment of existence, in power, in wholeness, in forgiveness, in love, and in grace. And yet the joy that is beyond that, to glory in the oneness of your united spirit. This Aquarian age that is in the birth canal is to be a time of great expansion. You know, you've lived so long in history that has mostly war and anguish and darkness and fear that you make the assumption without even thinking of it that that's life. That's the way life is. Life is struggle. Life is pain. Life is death. Life is short, nasty, brutish. But that's only the way it's been. For purpose. You have seen only the beginnings in your own lives of what it's going to be like not to be afraid, what it is to now cautiously, hesitantly expand, test your strength, take on challenges that would have frightened you in the past. Cautiously, hesitantly, but with increasing bravery, as you find that the old barriers have no substance and melt away before you as you grow. And as your numbers grow, you become the new age. And what is you, writ small, becomes humanity, writ large. And a new age, not dominated by fear, who is an age motivated by the need to expand, to test, and therefore increase your strength. Without the self-doubts that you will do harm with your strength. I can't be responsible for all of this. It's too much for me. I might succumb to temptation. I might not be strong enough. I might not even be good. When those are wiped away, all of those breaks that have slowed your progress, all of the roadblocks and detours that you have erected so that you can negotiate life, avoiding as much as possible the scary parts. Without those, it is a broad and smooth highway. Without challenge, absolutely not. Without fear. Humanity is finally entering into the actualization of its purpose. To be guides, teachers in this universe. How the universal applause will break out when the new child emerges from the dying dragon. Now you are in the beginnings of a process that is a glorious and triumphant process. But because you are living in a world with millions upon millions of those who have no knowledge of this, no understanding, not even a glimpse of what might be, and who are therefore overwhelmed increasingly with fear, you receive it all the time when you turn your television set on, when you read your newspaper, when you talk to the people at the office or at your places of business, people in your own family. You have been immunized, but yet you are surrounded by the evidence of this dis-ease. And how tempting it is, from old habit, to be fearful. Oh, this is terrible, there's going to be a war and people are going to be killed. And now I'm certainly not making fun of this, because it is a serious matter. But part of the gift, a beautiful aspect of the gift of your wholeness, of your freedom from fear, is perspective. The Bible has said the poor you will have always with you. Always going to be poor people. Now, does that mean, well, there are always going to be poor people, so why should I bother with them? Or does it mean there are always going to be poor people so that I may give and know the joy of my expansion by reaching out a hand to another? You are, each and every one of you, going to be needed in your families, in your friendship groups, in your work, wherever you are. The lives that you touch need your perspective, your understanding that what seems like disaster is the destruction that must take place for the new construction to rise. This is a bankrupt world. created throughout history by a people and by individuals dominated by fear, who have erected safeguards against each other, protection, protection, protection. And the best defense is a good offense. And that is the tradition from which you have come. Only you know that this war, this signal of fear, is a part of a process leading only to triumph over fear, leading only to the end of the duality. No other possible outcome. Will people die? Will people suffer? Yes, yes, and yes. That is where your perspective must come in. Not that you do not feel the compassion and the pain for those who die in this process of transformation. Recognizing in your increasing wisdom that nobody loses in the journey of life. That each incarnation has its lessons. That in the school of life, not everyone is a graduating senior, but they will be. And so you give of your plenty, your love, your faith, your understanding to those drowning in fear. You don't need to go out and look for opportunity. It will be there for you. It is not an accident of fate that you are a pioneer in this journey. It doesn't matter how far your influence affects if you affect but one person. If you can reach out your hand and bring peace, understanding to just one person, it is a justification for your life and an illustration of your purpose as a child of God and as a new being. These years involved in the death of the old, part of it's going to be war, disease, economic collapse. These are not minor things. Do I say that you will exist behind an invisible shield so that none of this will touch you? No, I do not say that. What I say is that through the process that you have undergone, you have developed the strength and the wisdom and the perspective and accepted the grace that will see you through these stormy days. Not merely existing, not merely surviving, but growing in your strength, growing in your wisdom, growing in your compassion, growing in your ability to share. And the tide will turn. Critical mass will be reached. More and more individuals will awaken. The flowers that grow on the battlefield will cover the battlefield. Look you upon the flowers and don't become preoccupied with the war. There are many lessons to be taught and to be learned during this process of change. Lessons about false pride. Lessons about personal responsibility. Lessons about greed. Lessons about the adverse use of power. Lessons about sharing. You know yourself through the journey that you've been going through that it's very seldom that these lessons are quickly learned and quickly adopted. That it is a painful time because it means changing your mind set in so many areas. Change of attitude, that sounds simple. That's the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing. And you're only able to do it because you came into this life so close, so near to reaching critical mass in your own being, to tilting the balance toward your healing and your wholeness. But to move those few metaphorical inches in the course of the life, is very hard, very difficult. Reward yourself, congratulate yourself, celebrate yourself for the progress that you have made. For no human beings have done it before. It was not time. You have prepared the way for the triumph of love in a struggle with a ghost that everyone believed in. You don't see many fairies and elves around anymore. People stopped believing in them. They were real. Not from this dimension, but frequently appeared and frequently to be seen, to have the myths created around them. But it faded. Belief faded. Power went out of them. Fear fades now in your lives, and yet, in the lives of humanity as a whole, it is at a fever pitch. I ask you to look at your news broadcasts and your newspapers, looking for that. What is there in this situation, whatever the situation, that imbues fear into those who hear of it, those who are involved in it? There has been no real bloodshed yet in this anticipated war, yet there has already been great cost in terms of fear. I said many years ago now that you would see greater and greater sources of fear appearing in everyday life, so that that very basic confidence of surviving till the morrow is shaken around the world. You have seen international terrorism. You have seen fear on the streets, where you are afraid to go out at night or to go into certain neighborhoods. You have seen the evidences of fear boiling over, so that some poor creature will go and murder dozens of his fellow human beings in a paroxysm of fear so great he cannot tolerate it. Where you know deep in your heart, and every human being knows deep in his heart, but cannot acknowledge that you may be gunned down in your local McDonald's. That there isn't anything that you have counted on that you can count on anymore. That the economy is fragile. That death is everywhere. That humanity seems to have lost its way. That there are conscienceless killers in the dark in the city. That war lurks around every corner. Your process has been immunizing you against this. But those who have not been immunized are becoming maddened with fear. The very stately progression of this progress toward this war, well calculated to create the maximum of fear. Looking at a specific deadline. Seeing hope after hope quickly dashed. There doesn't need to be a war now. The fear has been sown so widely and so deeply that if this war, this week, were aborted, it would not calm those fears. A moment's sigh of relief, and then the sure and certain knowledge, if not now, later. The beast of war, once awakened, will not go back to sleep until its appetite is satisfied. And the war that is going to reveal itself over a period of years is going to be a very hungry beast indeed. It is only when humans are exhausted with the struggle, where they can bleed no more, where they can kill no more, when they have reached the darkness of the darkest part of the night, that process of disintegration and destruction can end, and the process of rebuilding takes center stage. As I have said, it is not all night out there. Flowers are growing in the battlefield. And the time will come when the flowers cover the battlefield. But that time is not now. You are seeing fate. You have free will, and I've emphasized that 1,000 times. Yet there is a storyline to humanity's progression. There are events that are simply fated, that their form has the freedom to vary somewhat, but the final analysis, certain events must take place to create the conditions for the ending in which is buried and from which emerges the new beginning. This is such a period. More and more of the events of the world are fated. This inexorable progress that you have felt, it was like a steamroller, and you thought no one could stop this now. It has taken on a life of its own. The immovable object has encountered the irresistible force. And the outcome will be very noisy. At this time, it is inevitable that there will be war. Doesn't matter if it is delayed by a week or 2 weeks or a month. It is inevitable that there will be war. It is nothing to celebrate, but it is nothing to mourn. It is the gateway through which humanity must pass. Just as in your own lives you needed to embrace the fears and not run from them. Explore the darkness and not hide from it. The field must be cleared. The old structures must collapse. This is not the end of the world. It is simply the end of civilization as you know it. And about time. Exactly about time. For the new institutions of humanity aren't going to be based on fear and self-protection, and I'll get you before you get me. Therefore, the institutions created by human beings must reflect the new reality. Therefore, the old institutions become rickety and brittle in their old age and increasing irrelevance, subject also to the transformational energy of the Christ that has entered the world and humanity as a whole, creating first dissension and destruction, and then oneness and peace. But you can't have one without the other. There is no easy way. This is another of the many lessons that you must learn. There is no easy way. No one is going to suddenly change the circumstances and get you out of trouble. You must bear the responsibility for your choices. And if your choices are the choices of the angry child of the Piscean age, to fight for what you want, to kill those who disagree with you, then that will be the pattern. But it is a pattern that is ending. More and more are awakening, and it is the war and all of the wars themselves that stimulate the change, that create the conditions for peace. So many are on the brink of awakening. Now war truly becomes a horror when you begin to see that that's not right. I don't care if we've always had war. It's not right. There not only must be another way, there is another way. And more will wake up and say that and see that and act on it. But they need the example. They need the horror brought home. This is indeed unacceptable. What does it accomplish? And here's a wonderful example to learn from. A war based only upon greed and upon laziness, upon ego, power gratification, no true cause at its heart, saving the antiquated, absolutist kingdom of Kuwait, artificially created within the lifetime of many who live now, having no true justification for its existence as a separate nation, not some brave and struggling little democracy that we must, as Americans, protect and save from the big bad wolf. No. The issue is oil, which means the issue is power. Humanity, as it's presently constituted, will not, by and large, look for a substitute for oil until all of the oil is gone. The new humanity, growing finally into its adulthood, will not respond that childish way, but that is yet the pattern of those in charge of this world, this decaying reality. And so you have a singularly pointless beginning to a singularly important struggle. You can see behind the lies. I've said to you before, you can't be fooled anymore. Now that spirit has permeated your being, ending the barriers, the blindness that has plagued you in the past, you can't be fooled. You can't be fooled in your personal life. You can't be fooled by the nonsense of politicians, by the nonsense of commercials. You see through lies and obfuscations. And so when someone says, we're going to fight this war for high and noble purpose, you must smile. There is no high and noble purpose in this. If this were an easily justified war, it wouldn't be the example that you need, that humanity needs. It is a nonsensical war, based upon ego. And yet, what it will unleash are the age-old enmities and the present-day struggle between that vision of reality which is dying and that vision of reality which is being born. And the struggle will come down to the old Israel and the new Israel, the United States of America, involved against all of the forces of the past, all of the angers, all of the ancient enmities. And not all focused in the Middle East, but that's the heart. That's the heart. You're seeing it around the world. You're seeing the breakdown of old structures and the chaos that results. Not that wonderful, joyous march into peace and plenty, when one dictatorship is removed and under it you find ancient angers and rages finally released from being bottled up for so long, and so people are at each other's throats. Ah, yes, it sounds very sad and very difficult, and you know it is, but only in the immediacy, only in the appearance. This is not going to be a long, long struggle. This war itself, this trigger war, is not likely to last in its immediate form. The process is being triggered by this, as it needed to be. It needed a big bang to start out this last drama of the Piscean age. But when you think about it, by and large, the battle will have been won, thus ending battle, by the end of this millennia, only a few years away. You'll still, the world isn't going to look as it looks now. You will be in a process of rebuilding. It'll be an exciting and challenging time, not a repeat of the past. It's not going to be peace and plenty and lots of TV sets and microwaves for one and all. It's going to be a rethinking and a restructuring of human society based upon a gradually emerging understanding of true human nature. You're doing this yourselves in your own lives. We've said before that this period of time now, dawning in your life, is the time of the new crop. The time when you look at yourself and you say, who am I really? When you work on self-identity, What do I really want? Not what Mom wanted, not what the wife or the husband wanted. What do I want? There are new questions to ask yourself when you are not crippled by fear, by false duty, by the desire to please at all expense. So you are beginning your journey of self-discovery and the implementation of the lessons of love that you have learned. The world will soon follow in your footsteps. And this will be like a particularly prolonged visit to the dentist's office. Over. This is the greatest drama of human history. And if you use your perspective, you'll appreciate it. You say, well, it is fun to be here. Now that I know I'm not here for some horrifying defeat, but rather for the triumph of love, the triumph of the end of the duality. Let's enjoy this. It's a new kind of enjoyment. It's not going out and having a good time. It's a sense of deep satisfaction that you are one with a process of healing, and that you will be used to your highest capabilities, and that the kind of joy that you will receive is the deep joy of a function served, a purpose revealed, peace found. Now I will entertain any questions that you have, preferably initially on the subject at hand, but then we could open it more widely.
Humbling with myself, because I've in the past I felt so strongly for other people, and I'm not really sure that's what I want to feel.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought this question up, because until you get to know compassion, it's easy to confuse it with pity and sympathy. Pity and sympathy are part of the past. Compassion comes from a higher consciousness, a deeper awareness. With that compassion, however, and with the process that has rewarded you with that compassion, comes also a clear and distinct sense of realism. As I said, no nonsense. I'm not going to listen to excuses, to lies, to dodges. I won't do that to myself, and I won't allow it in my life. Now, so the effect of this is to make you a bit sterner and a bit firmer also. The compassion is there, but compassion is not acted on in order to make someone's difficult way easy, but to provide a helping hand, a shoulder, to share your own strength, but a recognition ever more clear that people, individuals, have an obligation to themselves and to others in their own healing. That when you see those who are persistently self-destructive, willfully blind, content to be helped rather than to become strong, you will not tolerate it, and you will say so, and you will feel it, and don't hesitate, and don't shy from it, and don't be afraid of it, and don't think it's wrong. You are becoming an adult in a world of children. It doesn't mean you can't retain your sense of joy and the joyful child within you. What it means is you begin to see things with a lot of fog removed from your vision. And you can see that the fruits of past sympathy have not been an unalloyed success. You can look at the welfare system, for example, and suddenly you see clearly not only is the system destructive and encouraging generations of dependency, but that those who are victims of the system are not simply victims. It is demeaning to look upon a human being as simply a victim. All cooperate in their own victimization, even those who seem the most helpless. If they have not cooperated in this life, they have prepared the road of cooperation in other lives and must find their own way out. You cannot take anyone else's true burden upon your own shoulder. You can help them to see the issues that they have personally to deal with, and you may hopefully help them to ease the way of understanding, but they must make the decisions and they must take the actions. They must turn around and face their own fearful enemy. This is informed compassion. This is the compassion of God, who understands and who forgives, but doesn't say, well, it's all right, you can get in anyway, because I feel sorry for you. But who is moved by the pain that must be undergone in the process of facing fears, of turning the tide, and offers guidance and offers sustenance, but does not deny the existence of the challenge. It does not try to take on the burden of someone else's challenge in a misguided attempt to save them.
Kind of a basic thing. When you talk about that people need to go through this pain and that it's part of the process, it still feels like such a harsh thing to me.
Yes.
I don't understand, like, what is the necessity of the pain?
You have surrounded yourselves with pain lifetime after lifetime. You have hidden from the pain and clutched it to yourself. You have visited pain upon others. You have created a false vision of yourself, a false vision of the world. You have contented yourself to take lives of detours to try to avoid pain, or lives of detours in order to inflict pain. You have pain as a face of fear has been a ruler in your life. And sometimes the homeliest analogies are the most effective. If you have a diseased tooth in your mouth, at this juncture of scientific development, if you have a diseased tooth in your mouth, you don't have to do anything about it. You can let that disease continue and build. Ultimately, you're going to suffer a lot of pain because of that disease. But in your effort to avoid the pain, you actually ensure its increased intensity and inevitability. Or you can take your courage in your hand and you can go to the dentist and you can have that tooth healed. Now, that's going to involve some pain too. There is no healing that does not involve pain. Pain, in and of itself, is not necessarily a negative. It is generally fear that motivates it. But pain can be approached as a healing way also. So that, for example, you have fears. We all have fears. Every human being has fears. Has always had fears. It is generally thought by those who seek the spiritual path, initially, that they are going to be able to happily bid those fears goodbye and see them float gently away from them. That isn't the way it really works, because you must learn to embrace yourselves. Not to try to become some Sunday school image of what perfection looked like to your mom or to your dad or to your Aunt Ellen or to whoever that sold you that belief. If you were only a little more like so-and-so, if you only didn't do this and did more of this, and you try to initially recreate yourself in that phony image, but then you finally realize as your journey progresses that there isn't anything wrong with you in the first place, that what's wrong is your attitude. That you look at what you do and what you don't do, and you criticize it and condemn it. Then as you go even further, gradually the fear that has cemented those negative beliefs about yourself begins to give way. The negative things about yourself were created by fear. They can only be healed by releasing the fear. Fear can only be released by engaging it. You can't just sit around and say, I release you. You have to say, I love you. I love the result of this fear. I love the cause of the fear because I love myself. I have learned to have sympathy and understanding and compassion for myself. I recognize that in those areas that I have perceived as darkness, some of them aren't dark at all, but that's a bill of goods that's been sold to me. And some of them are dark because I have fed fear into them, and they are the results of that feeding. By embracing yourself and all of your warts, the poison ceases to spread and then begins to be healed. The outcome of your experiencing the pain of the relinquishment of a way of life, a way of looking at things, the pain of disappointing the authority figures in your life, including your own ego, by the path that you must take in order to heal yourself. The pain becomes finally a sweet pain as you recognize that its outcome is peace and healing, and then vanishes altogether. But there isn't any way around it. You have to experience that darkness before dawn. The mother who is pregnant, the mother-to-be who is pregnant, must experience the birth. The child that is being born has even more forgetfulness about the process of birth than the mother who birthed the child. And it's common knowledge that however difficult a birth may be, quickly amnesia sets in so that another birth can conceivably take place. So it is for the child being born. Believe me, that journey from the comfort and the safety and the security of the womb into the harsh, cold wind and noise of the material world is as frightening an experience as a human being will ever have. And then to be whacked at the end of it, my goodness, adding insult to injury. It is traumatic. But out of that trauma comes birth. Out of the trauma of your own psychic death comes rebirth. Embrace the pain, embrace the fear, and it transforms. Alchemy takes place. And that which was disguised as fear and experienced as pain is revealed finally in its true nature of love and healing. Yes?
I really am having a hard time understanding where someone like Saddam Hussein is coming from, and also, is he just a pawn, or is he using the whole Muslim versus the rest of the world?
Well, of course he's using it. He is the political man. He's not a particularly religious man, but he will use the forms and the words of religion in his own purpose. He is a man consumed by ego, who must, in order to deal with his fears, must subjugate everything around him. It is those who choose to be dictators that are among the most fearful of human beings. They must control everything in order to feel safe. And in order to feed a ego unfed by true love must come conquest, the respect of fear. And so he comes in contact in this issue and understand that there was no reason for him to think that he would be in any way seriously opposed in the action that he took. His experience with the United States would have led him to believe that they would wink and turn the face, not to draw the line. So it's not that he went into this looking for a war, but he went into this with ego on the flag of his ambition. And now that the line has been drawn, he finds it impossible to turn around. He tries to find ways that will yet protect his ego. Because if his ego is unprotected, then he is nothing. And he falls prey to the fears that he has fought off all his life. And so he seeks to turn what has been naked aggression and greed and theft into a holy war. And a war on behalf of the poor homeless Palestinians. Well, it has nothing whatsoever to do with the reality, any more than our defending some hardy democracy has anything to do with the reality of our protecting our sources of oil. So you have lie facing lie. You have a man consumed by ego facing off against a man consumed by fears of his own inadequacy, who must prove his strength if it costs everybody everything. Not an evil man, it's a frightened man. Hussein himself, not an evil man, a frightened man. Fear is the source of that which you call evil.
Or is it just too late then for Saddam to turn back with...
No, it's not too late at all. And it's not outside of the realm of possibility. What I do say is even if that should happen, the war is inevitable and cannot be long delayed, because the tensions that lie behind the war, having less to do with the immediate matter of oil, the immediate matter of expansionism, the tensions and the imbalance of the area, of conflicting interests, of the time that dictates this final struggle among the religions and the believers in separation, still pertain. Whatever happens in the immediate future, I would say that the odds are well over 90% that this war will have its breakout now, the next few days. But human beings have free will, but there is a pattern within which that free will exists. And it is the pattern, the fated structure itself, the columns that support the reality that we're dealing with here.
Do you see the U.S. staying in for the duration, or just starting the whole thing and getting out?
Oh, there is absolutely no way for the United States to extricate itself from its role in this journey of transformation. None whatsoever. The entire world ultimately is engulfed in this. And I'm not talking about a nuclear holocaust. We've spoken of that many times. While there may be nuclear incidents, this is, as I said before, this is not the end of the world. It's the end of civilization as you have known it. And there's a very vital difference there. It's not the end of life. It's the beginning. So.
There have been reports that if those oil wells go up, which Sproul complains that will affect the atmosphere so very badly it will have bad repercussions all around the world. Is this?
I draw your attention once again to the fact that the true product on today's marketplace is fear. Fear in all of its forms. And as human beings begin to recognize that in many ways they have opened Pandora's box since the Industrial Revolution, that they have, in discovering their power, abused it, and generally not intentionally, but out of ignorance, and retain that abuse, generally not intentionally, but out of greed, that it is guilt that projects itself and says, oh my God, and what do you say to yourself if something, when you've been lost in fear, something bad happens? You blame yourself. Say, oh, if I hadn't done this, oh, if I'd only done that, why did I do this? And so humanity as a whole says, look what we've done to ourselves, we're poisoning ourselves, we're all going to die, we're all going to gasp, the world is going to end, the earth is dying, etc., etc., etc. And now all of that is not to say that the earth does not need healing or that human beings do not need healing. But let's add a grain of salt to the mixture and recognize that throughout human growth, for all of the missteps and all of the mistakes, nonetheless, there has been progress. And that in the development of the scientific aspect and the development of the mind that has been so intrinsic a part of this age, with all of the missteps and all of the mistakes, again, it has not gotten out of control. And where error has been found, by and large, in the past, it has been corrected. It always takes time. Things have to be really critical before the human being will say, oh, all right. All right, we'll do something about it. And things are not that critical now. Do not be a part of the fear that is o'erspreading the land. Yes.
Could we talk a little more about the coming new civilization? On a positive note?
Yes, I'll talk briefly about it because I intend to talk in more detail about it another time. The story of the Piscean age naturally was a Piscean story. Now, I realize that not all of you are versed in astrology, but I would recommend a certain basic understanding, investigation into it, that will help you in your understanding of what is taking place now in the precession of the equinoxes and the movement of the Earth on its journey. And remember that Earth and humanity are inseparable also. That the Earth is the mother of the human being, of the physical aspect of the human being, and its journey is the human journey. And as the influence, the energy that has permeated the Earth during what we have called the Piscean age changes, and it's in the time of change now, the characteristics then of the Aquarian age become to be recognized. What are those characteristics? Well, definitely an involvement in science, an increased involvement in science. You may expect space travel, but by different means, not the slow and impractical fuel-driven means that you have now, but means that will allow true space travel, not long, arduous journeys to get to a speck a little ways away from your speck. But a way that will avoid the specks altogether, and that's going to come. That's going to, really, I've said this before too, but a lot of what you have seen in this century, particularly in the last 50 years in science fiction, may seem silly and fantastic, and certainly some of it is, but the core ideas are visionary. They are the harbingers of what is to come. They are both product and inceptor of the future. And, the Enterprise was named after the Starship Enterprise. You see that fiction and fact mingle and blend, and art and reality become one. You have seen the future to a degree through Piscean distorted lenses in some of science fiction. So on the mechanical level, and it is the age to come is very much involved in that, in science and mechanics and building better things, but guided again by a clearer understanding. The death of fear changes history. And so history is not going to be just the story of war. It's not at all going to be the story of war. There may still be a struggle for a time, because just as the Piscean age, to achieve its fullness, required about half the time, so will the Aquarian age require time to develop into its wholeness, into where it is the true embodiment of its own nature. So, at any rate, peace. Peace is going to be a powerful characteristic of this age. Peaceful development. Intra-human understanding. The end of racism, sexism. It is finally, because you connect, as I've said before, you all connect as you go through this process. Ultimately, all of humanity will have gone through this process and connected one with the other. Once you have done that, you can no longer have the kind of prejudice that has characterized the Earth in the past, because you will have recognized on a cellular level your brotherhood and your sisterhood with all others of whatever color, faith, sex, what have you. That you are not identical, but you are one. And so that is going to be the end of that sordid little story. And you will find living, as people recognize both their individuality and their oneness, you will find that the core genetic family, and you're seeing that already, is not going to be the center, not going to be ultimately the Aquarian way. It's going to last certainly well through your lifetime, so those of you who are very attached to that way of being need not fear. You will be able to live out this lifetime in your family. But in the future, as the world evolves, and as humans continue to evolve, then you will see a recognition of a new reality needing to be expressed in a new way. And it's not, again, some faceless sort of beehive that we're talking about, but a joyous communion of those of like energies. God will not be dead, though Christianity and its journey will have been completed. Instead, there will be a universal recognition of the reality of God, because God will have become so intrinsic and aware part of the human being that it would be like denying that you had a left foot if you did. And so, that's enough of that. More?
Can I ask a personal question?
Certainly.
Could you tell me about a man named Michael in my present life and past life, in relation to what you've talked about already, struggling and confusion and fear and seeking my own self?
Yes.
This is a claustrophobic image that I see before me. One who clings with desperation to the false protection of the cave. One who hides. It is difficult for the light to reach the dim recesses of the cave. Yet one cannot live forever in a cave. There is a need and a reality of your separation from that influence and energy that is a vital ingredient in your own triumph. There is not sadness or despair in this, but an increasing sense of freedom. Go ask another question about this individual.
He has been a very controlling figure in my life, and I am separating myself from the situation. And I have a lot of fears,
Yes.
but also a lot of good feelings of my own strength.
Yes.
Well, it is welcome yourself instead into your freedom, and but not by saying I don't have any fears when you do. That's what I mean by embracing fears. Is not denying them. It's saying, okay, I am afraid of this, and by acknowledging that is the first step toward releasing the fear. By saying, okay, I'm afraid of this, but I'm stepping forward anyway. That's faith, and faith brings with it release from the power of fear. This is one to whom you have been in bondage in the past. I don't want to dwell on the past life circumstances because I don't have to persuade you that you have been in bondage to this individual. And that's really the only purpose of bringing up past life situations. It allows you to look at an issue in your present life from a safe distance, so that you can acknowledge and recognize things that you might otherwise deny. You're really past that in your development in the situation with this individual. All I can do is add my voice of encouragement to you in a process upon which you've already embarked that leads to your personal freedom, that is so much an evidence of your taking responsibility, that the ability to respond with love for yourself and with your own highest interests at heart is already taking place, and it is right, and it is timely, and it is not to the injury of anyone else. You will not heal yourself at the expense of another, that the outcome of the healing process in this instance will be finally setting up the conditions that allow the other, if he chooses, to release himself from his own bondage. But by conversely, if you had continued in that one-sided kind of power relationship, there would be no healing for either. This way, there provides the opportunity, the definite healing for you, and the opportunity for healing for him.
I'll answer a personal question too. I found out a couple of weeks ago that in February when the shift occurs to the Aquarian energy. It's the same point at which my Saturn return is over. And I'm wondering whether that's going to lift off a lot of weight from me.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah, you could just magnify by tenfold the release it's going to be for everyone else who is on in a similar position in the spiritual journey. Yes, and Saturn is not your enemy by any means. It is your teacher. And finally, you grow to love the influence of Saturn, because it is under the influence of Saturn that you make the greatest strides in your life and gain the greatest understanding of your nature and the greatest sense of your own strength, which is while also acknowledging that it is always a difficult time. It is also a serious time, a time where some can experience depression, and all will experience a serious overlay where you are conscious of the fact that, I'm not having as much fun, not only as I'd like to, but as I used to. Because that's really not the focus of the time. But now you are leaving it, and you are leaving it not unstudied, but you are leaving it as a graduate of the Saturn return that has taken your life issues and brought them into reality and into perceptibility in your life, and you've accepted the challenges and you've moved through them. So it's a truly joyous release, and you will very definitely feel that relaxation of stress and a lightening of the cloud cover.
The woman that I was talking to said that I wouldn't really feel it until like July. Is that?
No. I'm. If it was only the ending of a Saturn return, all right, perhaps that would you delay seeing how the difference for a while. But because of two other factors, one is that you've also been in the process of transformation, which is not necessarily at all a part of the Saturn return, and you're in a stage in that where it's going to be felt in a very positive way by you and you and you and you. As this year continues, that certain celestial events having created change are going to lighten the load by and large for those on the spiritual journey. Now, all of the influences, and they're all positive, of the planets and the stars upon you, as is the case with all of the influences of the rest of your life upon you, are all healing influences, are all positive influences. Negative is definitely in the eye of the beholder. And so because you are now more aware of that, you will capitalize upon the release of that negative, apparently negative, but certainly serious energy very quickly. So because of the general lightening process, you're going to feel that change much more sharply than you would if it was simply an ending of the Saturnian journey.
Plautus, would you comment a bit on pleasure and fun? It's almost like pleasure is a dirty word in the human race as it exists now.
Yes, it's a difficult time for that, as well as for so much else. It is the best of all possible times for pleasure and fun, because the need is so great. And do not censor or edit your own behavior and enjoyment out of consideration for the general dollar of the human condition. It is pleasure. True pleasure, not pleasure as a temporary escape from fear, but pleasure as celebration of life, of laughter, and of dancing and glee and what have you. That is a concomitant of your spiritual journey. This has been a tough time, and those who have thought, well, pleasure is a distant and fading memory, may be understood and forgiven for that feeling, because that's been the case for a while. But so if you don't feel the onset of joy and pleasure yet, don't think you've missed the boat. That your awareness of the release of your rebirth and the quickly fogging memory of the pain that it took to get here from there will combine, and you're all going to feel a great lightening of spirit, and you should experience and celebrate that in the means of pleasure. Yes, this is in this country, for example, quite a puritanical time, where there is regret for past excess and a feeling of a need to propitiate the angry gods, angry because of that past excess. It is the hangover, when you swear that never again. And so when you've got a nation and a world filled with people with a bad hangover, pleasure is not only difficult to find, but generally disapproved of. What do you mean, laughing and dancing? The noise is killing me. But forget about it. Don't worry about it. You have your pleasure, and there's nothing wrong with it, and quite the contrary. And it is the expression of joy and the expression of pleasure that will keep the light burning through the darkness. And those who are ready to experience their own joy will join you. You won't be alone in your dance.
I see a project about Ishi, Native American, and the person that I'm working with is now quite ill. And
Name, first name?
Larry. Can you help me understand my role in this situation?
Yes, it is appropriately a ritual role. It is very much has the characteristics of the production and of the thought and feeling and heart and energy and spirit behind it. You will be the guide through the process that he's experiencing. The shaman. Don't take that too seriously, but I mean, don't exaggerate it, but nonetheless, it's accurate. It is a magical role, and in which you will use, and you don't have to worry about being wise at the right moment. You will be. You will use the wisdom that has accumulated to you through your own efforts, through your own process. And it is an important time for you, as well as for him, of course. It is an important time for you because in enacting this ritual, in serving in this way, you will confirm for yourself and your own use your worth and your wisdom and your strength. And those areas that have been under attack within you in the past will be healed, and the seal of healing put on them through this interaction.